Well, this is my favorite phrase in radio, the very thriving medium, where they say play the hits. And this is play the hits part two, where I bring back one of the best guests, some of the best guests that I've ever had on my show before, and Sawyer Buettner is no exception to that. Probably the most popular guest that has ever been featured on my podcast, over 130 something episodes. You, my friend, are ranked as number one for most listens. So I'm very, very grateful for you to be back joining me.
Thank you for having me. Wow, I didn't know that. That's an honor. I think more so it's like the people of Moose Jaw and probably like my parents probably listened to that episode like 100 times each. But no, I love your work and I'm happy to be back chopping it up with you. I think that was like 2 years ago, two and a half,
Yeah,
almost
man.
2 years ago. So lots changed since then, but you're still doing your thing. I'm still doing my thing. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest messages of this podcast, we'll just dive right in, is and we were just chit chatting about it a little bit before we started, but this turning of the guard with our generation related to our work life balance, the relationship with work, and how you enjoy yourself and not feel miserable 24/7. You were recently playing football in France, which seems to me like one of the most potentially incredible experiences for an athlete, especially since you came from playing U sports where the level is probably a lot higher on average, and then you go to Europe and you get to travel and play football. What was that? What was the the entirety of that experience like, based on what you thought going in versus what it actually turned out being?
Mm. Yeah, a lot of people have asked me that, and I really haven't had like the time to like. So this is really nice to actually have the time to sit down and talk about it because man, like I was there for 6 months. You know when you go through an experience that like you're there for like a short amount of time in your life, but it feels like it was 6 months for like 60 years at some point. So it was like really challenging. It was like fun at some points. It was like maddening at other points. I'm like, what am I doing out here? Then I'm like, oh, this is sweet. So every day was something new. And so like I think that's the biggest thing, expectations of like I was so before I left for France. I'd finished school. I'd kind of done my university football career, and then I was like, well, I guess I get a job. So you're supposed to do. So I went. I was trying to get a job in the history field, but unless you're a librarian, you're not going to be getting I wasn't. I had dreams of being like Indiana Jones, but that didn't work out.
I think that's archaeology, actually.
Archaeology, shit. Well, like he likes history too, so I'm like, well, when I was a kid, I was like, man, he must have like a history background or something like that. But like that didn't work out, and so I got a job doing horizontal drilling. Knew nothing about it. I hate doing construction. I don't like any really doing like any of that shit to be honest with you. But I was like, I heard the wage. I was like, well, I can do this for a little bit. So I did it. It was making good money. But in the back of my mind, I always, since I was a kid, I always wanted to go do this, play football in Europe. I knew the opportunities were there. I talked to guys that had done it, but knew nothing about it. So one day, but I was in Fort McMurray. I'd actually fallen down the stairs one day at work, and my hand like blew up. I was like, I remember calling my mom and dad, be like, I think I broke my hand. And they're like, no, no, you're fine. So I'm like, I tape up my hand. I'm working in Fort Mac. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I remember hopping on the computer, looking up like, how can I go play football in Europe? And I found this site called Europlayers. And basically, it's like a database. You throw up your film there, and then teams reach out to you. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll do it. So I get back. It turns out my wrist was broken. So I got surgery for that. I'm in a cast. They put me on light duty at work. I'm on the computer. I'm supposed to be like working, but all day I was kind of just on Euro players, like looking up like different teams, different countries. And then so I threw up my film. I was like, well, we'll see what happens. And then a week later, I talked to a team in Australia, a team in Egypt, the Cairo Bears. And then I ended
Damn.
up, yeah, it's crazy. It's wild how many teams there's. And I ended up going to play in Cannes for the Cannes Iron Masters. I knew a coach from my time at U Ottawa that was coaching out there. Wayne Jacobs, a great guy. So I ended up playing out there. It was kind of a whirlwind. I signed in October, and then I'm getting on a plane on January 3rd. I guess getting back to expectations, I literally had no idea what to expect. I'd never been to Europe before. I had never like traveled abroad before. It had been a while since I played football, honestly. Like it had been, I didn't play that 2022 season, so I'm like, I don't feel good. I felt in good shape, but like you said, it's tough until you get out there. Like I hadn't competed at all, and so um, I get out there. The first practice, we have 40 guys to practice. Practices are fairly structured. Like I said, the talent level I could tell wasn't as good, but we had an awesome running back. Xavier Johnson played at South Alabama, actually with Brandon Bridge. So we had 40 players the first day. I'm like, oh, this is pretty sweet. Like, this is good. This is sweet. And then the next week of practice, we had like 25 guys. It's like, oh, that's, a little bit less guys. We only practice twice a week. And so I'm like, boys, where's all the guys? They're like, oh, they come and go. So I'm like, okay. And then kind of week by week, there was less and less, guys. Um, and so, and I ended up getting hurt early. I ended up like almost, I thought I had sports hernia. My groin literally blew up. So I missed a couple games. I come back, I play really well, and we play at a night game in Cannes. We win. I think things are going good. And then I get a concussion 2 weeks later. So I had to kind of grind through that. Uh, but the season, we ended up losing in our conference final by 3 in Paris. We took a 12-hour bus trip overnight to play the next day. So just stuff like that, man. Again, I'm getting long-winded, but like there's so much there's so many details in it. But it was just, all in all, it was a really challenging experience. I kind of thought maybe it would like be this grandiose adventure. I think kind of like yourself, right? When you took that job, you're like, oh man, this is gonna fix all my problems. Like, my life's gonna be so fucking good. And not that I had like big life problems, but I was kind of stuck being like, I don't like my job here. I'm gonna go to Europe. It's gonna be amazing. I'm gonna meet so many nice French girls. And the French girls are very nice. I'm gonna be on the beach every day, and I lived by the beach. It was really cool. But I think it just gets back to thing like expectations and like really never know what's gonna happen. You just gotta make the best of it. And I know I did that, so I'm proud of that. And again, I'm sorry for getting extremely long-winded, but it was like I was there for 6 months, but it felt like I was there for like 6 years. So it was like I do have to write a book about it one day because we're gonna run out of time here on Zoom. I apologize for that, man, but it was pretty crazy. It was a crazy time.
Man, I remember when I was at University of Calgary and leaving, and there was guys talking about like I want to go play in Europe and this and that. And I always thought to myself, I'm like, man, like that might be a cool avenue. And I know exactly what you're talking about, where you see this opportunity to travel, play football,
Mhm.
get your expenses paid. Dude, like that's sick. It's like being someone on the Regina Red Sox. Like as long as your living expenses are covered and you get a little bit on top of that, and you get to live in a cool place, what's the
Yeah.
downside? But then you realize when you leave Canada, 99% of places are far more disorganized. It's way more hodgepodge, like patched together. It's like the perfect movie quote that I want to use for this is when in Napoleon Dynamite, Napoleon and Uncle Rico are at the store where Summer Wheatley works, and he goes to the cash register and he puts down the pack of markers. And then Uncle Rico looks at Napoleon and says, come on, Napoleon, you know we can't afford the fun pack. We're just going to have to mix and match. That's literally what
Literally.
describes playing football outside of
Yeah.
Canada and the US, man. Even like guys who go into Mexico, it's like, you really have no idea what it could be like, man. One week it's great, and the next week it's hell on earth.
Yeah.
And there's a Stoic quote that I think it's Marcus Aurelius or one of those guys who says, like, every place you go to run for your problems, eventually there you are.
Yeah.
Like you are
Yeah.
always with yourself. So it's not about, oh, I need to go to this place to solve these problems and these things. But it's very easy for us to get caught in that frame of mind. We're like, dude, France, like every time I see your Insta story, I'm like, man, your life's a movie or a Cannes Film Festival. You might do this, you might do that. But like, you really don't know, again, all the details that go into that experience. It looks glamorous on the outside, but yeah, it's the picture of Homer when he's like flexing, and then the back,
Yeah.
it's like, all
Tied up. Yeah. Yeah. I feel that.
the
Yeah, man. 100%. And that's a great time because if you looked at my Instagram stories, everybody's like, "Oh, this man's like living the dream." And a lot, like I never was like, I was super grateful for the opportunity, right? Like I was in southern France playing football. Like how many people get to say that? And I was in the French Riviera, like a guy in Moose Jaw. Like you should see how the people dressed down there. I was not fitting in at all, but like I didn't want to. But like Monaco is 30 minutes away. I went to Monaco, and the yachts are like as big as my house here in Moose Jaw and stuff like that. So I'm getting to see these like crazy, crazy things. Um, but at the same time, like I was there to play football. Um, and not to, I don't want to put anyone like a negative light or whatever, but and my French teammates are awesome. A lot of the guys are awesome. I had a few challenging teammates, and some of the people at the head of our organization were a little bit challenging to deal with. But like you said, I didn't have any expectations, but it was so much different from what I'm used to, right? Like you said, some days we had 12 guys at practice. right? And then we'd play a game. And the way it works there is you have a 2 week bye because they think football is like very rough. So you need time to rest in between. So man, and like those are long 2 weeks, right? And like you said, like I was out there for this first month. It's like when you go to a new place, everything is cool, right? Oh my God, look at the bread. There's bakeries everywhere. Look at the sea. But then after a while, it's like, man, you got to cook for yourself. You got to do laundry. Like you're still living out here. It's a lot different from Moose Jaw. It's beautiful, but at the same time, you kind of get into that routine and the glamour kind of wears off. And from the outside, it looks like it's all like perfect, but like day to day, it was still amazing, but it was tough. Like we had a lot of time. We'd go to the gym, practice twice a week, and if we don't have a game, like that's a lot of off time, right? And I'm not a rich guy, and the French Riviera is really expensive. So it's not like people are like, oh, you just go here, just go here. It's like, man, I don't have money just to be like, I mean, flights in Europe are cheap, but I can't just hop on a flight like 3 times a week, right? I saw everything I wanted to see. Um, but it's tough day to day. I think that's why you're doing a great show of like just because it looks good, there's still some gritty parts that I think people miss just because they don't see it. I think that's what you're doing here is good, and I want to get that across because I thought I was just gonna go to France and things are gonna be like sweet. Every day is gonna be like vacation, and then I'll go tear it up on the field. And like I played well, but like I got hurt twice and missed some games, and then like you said, practicing twice a week with sometimes 15 guys. And then they're like, well, why isn't our passing game good? Well, it's like, because we're practicing twice a week, right? 15 guys in a different language, right? And so, like, I think basketball, you can, for the most part, you can just, some basketball people get mad at me, but I think you can show up maybe once a week, twice a week and go play a game. But football wise,
For sure. For sure.
I don't think you can do it
No.
offensively. Offensively, no. So, so yeah, just like the day to day was interesting. It taught me a lot about myself though, which I'm proud of, and I had a lot of adversity. I treated people as best as I could, even when sometimes I felt like I didn't get treated the best. But again, it is what it is, and I don't want to sound like it was a negative experience because I don't think they're. The older I get, I think you could probably say the same thing. Negative, positive kind of gets blurred, and it's kind of just like an experience, and you pick and choose like how it was. Now that I look back on it, I look at all just a big learning opportunity, and sometimes the longest 6 months of my life.
Yeah, man, that's so true. And I've talked to a lot of people who have become digital nomads and lived in Europe or lived in South America. And the classic thing you hear all the time is people say, "Oh, you're living the dream and it must be nice." But guess what? You move a lot, or you're away from your friends and family, or it's more expensive, or there's a language barrier, or XYZ. Like, there's a million things. Like you said, like you're a guy from Moose Jaw who is not, you know, of Monacan descent or something. So if you live in French Riviera from Moose Jaw, like people, I was having a conversation when the last day I was in Regina actually, with a guy who, whatever, he was just someone who picked me up and was the shuttle driver for Regina Motor Products. And he was saying to me, he's like, man, he's like, oh, it's so expensive living in Canada. And I was saying to him, I was like, man, like when I was in Fiji, like people there make like 250 Canadian an hour and still have the exact same living expenses as we do in
Yeah.
Regina and Winnipeg
Yeah.
with the currency exchange. So imagine if someone slashed your salary by 1,000% and and the cost of everything stayed the same. Like imagine that. Or imagine if you live in Europe and the cost of things are way more, like in Switzerland or some places in France, right? People think that Paris is this beautiful place, and yes, there's lots of nice things, but people there can be rude. They don't
Yeah.
like tourists. They don't like immigrants. It's dirty. Everyone smokes, which is
Everyone's
different,
smart.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's smoking indoors, smoking outdoors, like it's the 70s.
Everybody, it was crazy. I heard that everyone smokes. I'm like, I bet a lot of it. We had guys smoking at halftime. At halftime of our games, I look over there talking about like what our adjustments are in the deuxième demi on second half. Like we had one guy, Andrew, who I love, the linebacker. Pre-game, he's walking in. He has a he has a thing of chicken nuggets. He's dunking. He has a dart coming out of his mouth, and he has an espresso in his hand, and he's giving like they do like the two cheek greeting, so he's giving guys the two cheeks as he holds this dart in his mouth and these chicken nuggets and his espresso. I was like, man, this is crazy. So stuff like that's like really funny, and like it's stuff I remember for a long time. But like you said, like it's just like it's a lot different, and I knew it would be, but until you do it, I think that's what the good thing about traveling. You said in Fiji, I'm sure you saw like tons of stuff that kind of blew your mind. But for them, it's like, well, it's just day to day. And in France, I saw that as well. That's one of the best things I think about traveling is you can't broaden your perspective if you never go see different points of view or different places. So
I find that it can be difficult at times trying to work that balance between traveling and living while you're young versus people who are like, well, if you travel and you just run away from your problems, you're taking yourself with you everywhere you go. So you're not really, it's not curing your depression or you're not changing anything. Like it's more an internal battle. And so this kind of leads me to what we were talking about before we started recording with like, what do you do for like the perspective? I guess maybe it's more of our about our culture in Canada than it is what we experience day to day is like, what do you do for work? What do you do for school? And it just seems like, I don't know, like it seems like that's the highest priority where people label you or categorize you and your value as based on what academic degree you've achieved or what job you work. And it's not like, I don't know, like I met a group of Brazilian friends in Regina who were basically became the best thing that ever happened from being there. And when I met them, I never asked what they did for work. I just asked them where they're from and what soccer team they like and that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until the last day that I was actually like, yo, I never actually got around to asking, but what do you guys do for work? Just because I'm
Yeah,
curious and because I don't think this will ever come up in conversation again if I don't ask you now. And they were
right.
saying, yeah, like, oh, we do this and do that. And we try to get by, but it wasn't even a big topic of conversation. It's like, I care more about my friends, my community, my family than I do about, oh my goodness, I work as a driller or I work at this place. Like, I don't know.
Mhm.
It's a difficult position to be in. So I understand exactly what you're going through.
Yeah, for sure. That's always a question, right? Like, what do you do? And then you say it, and I don't think people listen after that. They was done playing football because, like, I've never been a big ego guy, but I could be the guy in Moose Jaw. I was like the football guy, and they'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing this year?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm in Ottawa," or "Oh, I played, Team Canada," or like, and that's cool to say that to people. And then once that was done, and they're asking, "What are you doing?" and you have to say, "Oh, I'm doing horizontal drilling," you can see them be like, "Oh, interesting," but they don't kind of, move past that. But again, like now it's people out, they know I was in France and they ask people from where I'm from around here, it is like, at this age, get a job, get married, buy a house, and then that's it, and live your life in Moose Jaw and surrounding areas. And for me, I'm just kind of battling that right now. Like I don't really think I could do that, but I don't really want to, right? So it's just kind of finding my identity now outside of football now that I'm done, and also like, well, shit, what do I do? What do I do next? And dealing with kind of expectations of people. So that's definitely been something I've kind of been battling for a while now, but I'm definitely kind of getting a better grasp on it.
And I think one of the difficult things that's just the reality of when guys keep playing football. And I've seen guys chase dreams into perpetuity. And I'm like, at some point or another, there comes a part of you that has to move on or that can't be tied or married to your
Hmm.
identity playing football. I remember when I first stopped playing, it was not even really out of my choice, as it is for most people, right? You get hurt or you get cut or released if you're a pro, and then that's it. No one wants to sign you and you're done. And it's not because you wanted to, it's because no one else wanted you. And I remember going through that the first time when I tried it for the Bisons after playing junior, and then I got cut. And I was like, well, I know there's a realistic chance I may never play football ever again. And after that happened, for the first few days, I was kind of lost. And then when I got a job to work with the football team, I realized, wow, I actually love this way more than any time I ever spent playing football, except for like
Hmm.
grade 12, because that was like so unexpected and what started this journey. So, what have you done to explore the kinds of things that you like doing or figuring out what you may do in the day to day in the next who knows how much time?
Hmm. That process kind of started honestly when I was in France, kind of near the end. And I remember like I was waking up to go to practice, and for the first time in my life, I was like, I don't really feel like practicing today. And I was like, and I felt like that sometimes. We had a tough week at Ottawa, a tough week with Thunder with the Rams. But then you get up to practice, hang with the guys, and you start throwing, and I'm like, ah, man, I love throwing. This is what I love to do. I love hanging out with the boys and chopping it up. And then, my last weeks in France, I'd be out there kind of warming up, and I'd be like, man, I don't really feel like throwing a ball today. And I was like, I would go home and be like, just kind of sit there and be like, man, that this is weird. This hasn't happened to me before. But I'm proud of myself because I could have just buried it down and been like, I'll keep going. Like I'll go play somewhere next season. I'll keep going. I'll keep going. But I'm like, man, I don't. I think just my intuition is kind of telling me like, hey, bro, it's okay to be done. Like I said, I had another concussion, and I was kind of thinking about that. And my family have watched me play. They've seen like the highs and the lows, and I mean, I got carted off against McMaster with Ottawa. I got hurt playing against the Huskies with the Rams. So I've had my fair share of head injuries and stuff. And, my mom kind of told me when I kind of told her, I'm like, hey, I think I'm done. She's like, honestly, I don't really, she basically said, I get super nervous watching you play now. I don't really enjoy it watching you play. And that was, to me, that was kind of tough. I was like, oh, man, yeah. It's like, if I kept playing, it would be for selfish reasons and like egoic reasons of like still going around moose shot telling people, oh, yeah, I'm playing in this country and I'm playing here. Right. And I know guys have done that, like you said, and I think you're playing for the wrong reasons. And eventually that's going to catch up to you. So for me now, it's kind of like, do I like I people ask me to come coach now, and I'm like, do I love football as much as I thought I do? Because just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're going to be a coach. You've seen that. I've been around some guys that were good players, but coaching wise, they couldn't do it, or they didn't, or they get out there and it's like, holy shit, well, I got to put in like a 10-hour day after I just got off work. Coach, it's like I don't want to do that. So that's kind of where I'm at now. You've been a big inspiration for me, seeing you do your thing. Like I'm like, man, watching you do your thing, I was like, that seems really, really interesting, getting to talk to people, whether it's sports, about life. So I'm just kind of going down those avenues, but again, it's kind of dealing with like you said, it'd be easier if I just wanted to be like concrete worker, which I've done, or like if I just wanted to be a driller, because there's all those jobs. But trying to find like a job in like media, or like, do I want to like be like a football historian, which I know to people sounds like they're like, what are you talking about? But like, man, I love football. I love history. Like we've done this before. Like you can give me a quarterback, I'll tell you what I went to college, right? So that stuff that just comes like naturally to me. So I'm like, why wouldn't I go use that? So for me, that's kind of the tricky part about now. How do I go about doing that? And that's kind of why how I was being an asshole to everyone around me, because I was like, I'm looking for jobs, Michael. I don't want to hold a shovel, for the rest of my life. Um, but I kind of got out of that negative mindset and just being like, look, it's gonna be all right. Something cool will come along. That's been like the story of my life. Sometimes the harder you try for something, the more you hold on to it. You just kind of choke it into submission instead of like allowing it to come to you. So that's kind of why, not to sound too much of a hippie, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm sure you've kind of found the same thing. Just kind of following your passions pretty much. I know that sounds cheesy, but now that I'm 26, I'm like, shit, they were right about that. I got to try and follow my passion, see where it takes me. And like guys like you watching do your thing has been pretty big inspiration. I don't think maybe some people don't tell you that, but you might post a clip, you're like, oh man, I wish I get some more views. But all it takes is like one person like me to see, be like, shit, man, like that's pretty sweet. He's doing his thing. And that's where I take inspiration from. And again, no, I know a lot of my friends, a lot of my family, um, go get a job, get a good, pension, start a family. And that's cool too. Maybe I want to do that. But right now I'm like, I don't think I do. So I got to try and find something that I'm actually passionate about. And that's tough. I think that's kind of what your whole show is kind of around, kind of, right? It's just kind of like in your mid 20s, it's tricky. I feel a little bit more lost now than I did even when I was like 16, which is kind of crazy to think about. But that's honestly where I'm at. So
Yeah, man. I appreciate the kind words. It definitely means a lot knowing that you're right. A lot of doing this is tough sledding when whether there's a few people that listen or 100 or whatever. That's why the first time we did it, I was like, man, I'm so ecstatic that people actually wanted to listen to what Sawyer had to say, because most of the time, like it's people only, again, this is the classic cliche. People only see the tip of the iceberg, right? But they don't see everything else that goes underneath and how deep it really goes. And I think what a lot of people are realizing in our generation is they're waking up from the traditional norms of go to work, get a job, 9 to 5, get married, blah, 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 have kids, sacrifice what you want. And then eventually what's going to happen is you're going to have grandkids, and that's going to be the consolation prize in life. And then you got 15 years to live, if that, and then boom, that's it, the end.
Mhm.
And whenever I've thought about, I remember it really hit me. I was sitting on my bed, and it was about 2 months into being in Saskatchewan. And I was like, everything I have right now, I wanted. I wanted a job in sports media, check. I
Mhm.
wanted a 2-bedroom apartment I could afford it by myself, check.
Mhm.
A
Got it.
car, check. I have whatever food I want to get, clothing, there's no issues, check. And I kind of sat there, I was like, damn, this is kind of boring. Like,
Yeah.
I I don't know if I feel entirely fulfilled by this. And like we said, like it was really that week of the Grey Cup, or because before I was like, okay, like eventually it'll just hit you like out of nowhere. This magic fairy dust is gonna fall from the sky, and you're gonna be, wow, I love my job, I'm so fulfilled, blah blah blah. But I was just still kind of chugging along, and then the week of the Grey Cup came. I was like, sweet, this is awesome, let's go. And we're out and interviewing people and doing this stuff. And then we're turning to work on Monday. My friends are home. I didn't get to spend time with them. And then I realized, man, I feel like I'm locked in like solitary confinement. Like I'm just sitting
Mhm.
here watching someone talk for hours and hours a day. And even though I liked everyone I worked with and the show was very successful, I'm like, there's no room to grow. Like there's nowhere for this thing to go. Cause
Yep.
either radio is gonna get axed or it's gonna be the only show left. And then when you're the only one left, it's like, well, do you really feel like you're being forced to regress? Not
Yep.
really. And so then I really started to ask these questions. And my boss had a conversation with me the week after the Grey Cup and was like, do you regret taking this job? And I was like, what? I was like, are you like twisting my arm to like get me to quit? Or are you insinuating you want to fire me? And I was like, it was so scary in that moment. Like, cause you sit there, and I was having like a quarter life crisis, and people like, oh no, it's just normal when you first start your job. I'm like, is this
Mhm.
really a normal feeling when people like doubt what they're doing seriously and actually try to do something about it? And I think that's the most difficult thing that you're probably going to deal with is when you actually have to do something for yourself that 99% of people are going to be like, Sawyer, you're being stupid. What the fuck are you doing, man?
Yeah.
And when no one's going to
100%.
support you, you know?
Yeah. And I think, yeah, until you kind of jump into the deep end like that, I won't know what that's like until I do it. But like I said, before I went to France, I had the quote every day. I kind of repeated myself do until you can do what you want to do. So I kept telling myself that. I kept telling myself that. And I was like, so then the France thing came along. I'm like, oh, this is what I want to do. And same thing kind of with you. I kind of got out there and I was like, well, this is a lot different than I thought it was going to be, but that's okay. So I kept grinding. I knew I was going to finish it off and put my best foot forward. But I think you can relate to it too. It's like that striving for like more, but then being content with what you have has kind of been the toughest thing, you know, for me. Because again, like I don't want to sound like some asshole that's like, whoever works a 9 to 5 is an idiot, whatever. Because some people honestly enjoy that, and some people that's what they have to do, right? Or some people don't want to do more than that, or they're maybe a little bit afraid to ask for more than that, and that's up to them, right? That's their own thing. Um, but for me, I'm kind of feel like you. I just kind of know that I want to like I'm young right now to take a chance on something, whether that's football or not football. That's kind of where I'm at now, and that's like scary. I think that's what you kind of went through. It's like once you're out of it, you're like, man, shit. You know, it's easy to say you want to go do something for yourself, but when you actually have to go do it, that's a scary thing. So kudos to you for doing it. I got to figure out what my kind of next thing is, but I'm trying not to stress about it. Instead, like being positive and keep my eyes open for something because something will come along. So it's definitely
Yeah.
a scary thing for sure. Like you said, man, 26, like these years have been kind of a little bit crazy. It's been pretty wild.
Yeah. Even looking in hindsight, sometimes you're like, wow, like if you don't, you know, and if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you know, you could
Yeah,
miss
Ferris
life,
Bueller.
right? Like Ferris Bueller, exactly. And it's, and it really didn't hit me until I was like on Instagram earlier this year. And one of my guys like, oh, for my 27th birthday, I was like, oh yeah, he's a year older than me. And then I realized I'm like, wait, we're born in the same year. I'm turning 27 this year. I'm 27, like 3 years from 30. And then when you have that realization, you're like, oh my God, like what's going on? What am I doing? Blah, blah, blah. And it's one of the most difficult things I think that not a lot of people talk about openly is people say, oh, you're going to, whatever, your 20s is hard. And by your time 30 hits, you're going to figure it out. And I'm like, man, I meet a lot of people who are still feel this way in their 30s and 40s. They've just shifted their attention to their kids or to something else. And then guess what happens when their kids grow up and move out? Then they're stuck with the same problem, but you're 45 or 50 or 55. And by that time, it's not that it's doomsday, but it can be a lot more difficult to do certain things that you want to do in life when you're 55 or 60 compared to when you're 25.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think same too, man. I came back from France, and I'm like, people I went to high school with, they're having their second kid, they're buying these big homes, and I don't play the comparison game ever, but it's hard not to. Right when you see this, I'm like, shit, I'm the same thing. I'm like, man, I'm 26 years old. Like, this is like, it's wild. And then it's like the expectations of where you're supposed to be as opposed to where you're at, and you're kind of fighting that, and it's a little bit, it's a crazy time, um, for sure. But again, that kind of comparison is the thief of joy quote is like very, very true. So I try not to get into that. But yeah, like I said, that's kind of the thing that scares me a little bit, not to think too much of the future, but is to wake up when I'm 45 and be like, man, I'm not where I want to be, and you don't have anyone to blame but yourself, right? And so that's kind of like the juxtapose of putting all that pressure on yourself, or like, but then it's like, man, like you said, the clock's ticking. Like when I look back 10 years ago when I was 16, it doesn't feel that long ago, but it's like, man, shit, like that was 2013. That's wild. Now I'm, I'm fucking 26, right? And I'm kind of making a joke with my friends. A lot of them like teachers are getting married, and I'm like, fuck, I just got back from playing football in France. Basically, I have zero money, no job right now. Well, I do have a job right now, but trying to find a different job. So again, it's just kind of the way I deal with things is mostly through humor and just being honest with myself. I don't know if you've gone through that, Susie, you have too. These past years, man, I've just been like, I kind of cut the bullshit with myself and just been like, yo, this is where I'm at. I'm open with people about if they want like this. I think it's a great conversation we're having. It's about like the future. Because a lot of people are scared to really talk about like what do they want to do because they're scared of being judged by other people or by themselves. Because I deal with that too. A lot of doubt. I dealt with a lot of doubt in my football career, doubting my abilities a lot. And then when football was done, I was like, well, that'll just fade because that's just a sports thing. But it was like, no, that's a life thing. It's like, no, sorry, my head, that's kind of my concept. Like, you can't fucking do that. You a football historian? What are you, something like, be realistic. Go get a job with SAS Power, go get a job with SAS Energy, like do what your grandpa did, So I'm kind of battling that that doubt, because I have a great support system, my family and friends, but at the end of the day, you really got to support yourself. So that's kind of been my biggest uh, struggle, and it's kind of a daily grind, as it is for most people. But I think it's good because I just like being open and honest about it because I think that's helps people, and I think that's what you're doing on your show. Because a lot of people just bury it, and they want to look good on Instagram and look like they got all the shit together. I know a lot of people that look like they have their shit together, but they definitely do not, right? So I think it's good for people to kind of get it out there. I think that's what I'm watching clips from your show and watching your show, and I think it's been the biggest thing because, like you said, I think I post a lot of like stupid funny shit on my Instagram or whatever, and people are like, oh man, this life just must be like he's not serious all the time, or he's just having a great time all the time. And that's not the case. I mean, I try to have a good time when I can, as much as I can, but it's been a bit of a battle last couple of years of like trying to figure out where I'm at. I think that's why your show's important because I think a lot of us are in the exact same position, and it's okay not to know, and just kind of have faith in yourself and faith in the future, I guess.
There's a book that I read that actually kind of inspired me to finally to to take the final shot of pivoting from my job. And I came across it on Twitter, actually, funny enough. I saw this guy tweet about how our relationship to work has changed and how people value you based on your form of employment, not based on what you do, like who you are as a human. And I remember it's like, oh, like I saw in his bio, it's like, I have this book called The Pathless Path. And it's like the story of how our changing relationship with work and how you don't necessarily have to do the traditional things anymore. And he talked about how he did the good thing, go in America, get a good job, go to good university, get paid a lot of money. And they got to a point where you're burnt out, you're sick, your health is tanking, all these sorts of things. And until you're really forced to wake up because of, and often some people it's till it's too late, like a huge tragedy or something that makes you go like, what am I doing? But some people actually never get that. They never get that wake up call. And the
Mhm.
wake up call that comes to them is on their deathbed. And they're like, oh, wow, my biggest regret, like on my deathbed, my biggest regret is not having, cared too much about what other people think. And he talks about it in this book about how he went to like he had enough money saved up, which obviously helps, but like went to Taiwan and spent like a month there, and it was like very inexpensive, and just reflecting and thinking and not really judging yourself for what comes up, or not judging yourself for what you're doing, or when people ask what you're doing. And it really inspired me to think about what my relationship to work is, or am I doing work that I find that is meaningful? Am I fulfilled? Am I impacting people? I know people talk about the concept of ikigai, like the Japanese philosophy of doing something that you get paid for, you're good at, you enjoy, and the world needs, kind of thing. And one of the analogies he gave that I thought was so perfect for people like us who love sports, he gave the analogy of how people approach life that is achievement oriented, like Kevin Durant approached playing in the NBA, where he was so unsatisfied with being on Golden State, or sorry, being unsatisfied being on Oklahoma, and he's like, I didn't win, I didn't win, I didn't win. Then he goes to Golden State, and guess what? He wins two in a row, and people don't
Mhm.
respect him, and he cares so much about what other people thinks, and he sits there and realizes, wait, that's it. I don't feel satisfied. I don't feel like I've achieved that much, even though we just won the finals back to back. I'm part of a dynasty. And then he switches to another team and another team. And it's just like he's constantly running around in this ring, lost, not knowing where he should go next, what he should do. And the guy makes what, 30, 40, 50 million a year. He has
Yeah.
two NBA championship rings. Like you'd look at someone like
Yeah.
that from the outside and be like, what's wrong with you? Like,
Mhm.
what are you so upset about? But guess what? Money doesn't fix that, right? So I know that obviously you need money to survive, and it can be a struggle when it doesn't give you options if you don't have money, but it also won't solve what you're going through internally.
100%. Yeah, I kind of went through that. I mean, I wasn't making Kevin Durant money at all, but with my job, I got right after my drilling job. I was making good money. I was working crazy hours, but like, every 2 weeks the paycheck would come in. And I remember the first time it came in, I was like, oh, sweet. I can I'm gonna go on Amazon and like buy some shit tonight. I'm gonna go on DHgate and buy a bunch of like 12 knockoff jerseys, which I'm not doing that anymore, but I used to. But then after a while, yeah, like I remember my dad asked me, how much money did you make in these 2 weeks? I told him. He's like, whoa. He's like, that's a lot of money. Like, it must be awesome. I'm like, well, I don't know. I was like, not really. I didn't tell him that. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of cool, I guess. And like you said, you need money to survive, but like when the paycheck hits, but the fulfillment's not there, then it's kind of like, it's like, then you start judging yourself even more and being like, man, I even feel more lost now. So like you said, like money's not going to solve all your problems. But I'm not naive to be like, oh, I can't, I guess I could try to live on the street or we can make it very far, but it's a nice bridge in Moose Jack you live under. But um, yeah, it's just kind of a tricky thing, right? Of like, I always thought, I was like, well, I'll keep making this money and then I don't know, maybe I'll get a promotion or maybe I'll have enough money to go move somewhere or do that. But I was like, man, I don't want to do that, you know? So that's why I'm happy or proud of myself. I took that chance and I went to France and it was challenging, but in the money in France, like I should get into that too, because I think a lot of people people are like, so what are you making over like 50K a season? I'm like, not even close, man. They pay for your flights. They pay for your living at a nice apartment, which I could see the Mediterranean Sea from my apartment, which was really nice. But other than that, you get 500 euros a month in an envelope in cash. Uh, and then that's it. And 500 euros for a month in Cannes doesn't last very long. And I'll be the first to say I'm not very good with money. I spend it way too fast. And then so we'd ask the boys, I'd be like, a week later, I'd be like, man, you guys like, do you have any money left out? They're like, no, we spent it all too. So it was just like, and I kind of knew that going in. I wasn't going over to France at all to play. If you're going to Europe to play football for the money, unless you're playing maybe in the ELF or the GFL, I'm not sure how much they get paid. But if you're playing, you're not going to be making a crazy good living. That's not why I went there. But again, it was at the contrast between like making a lot of money in my old job and not feeling fulfilled, as opposed to, not making such great money in France. But again, I'm there for different reasons. And I was kind of, building up myself in a different way.
Well,
Not financially, but
what would you say was the most positive eye-opening experience of being in France in terms of something that you had never expected before you got there, and then you saw it and you're like, wow, I'm so glad I saw this because now I can't unsee it.
really good question. Um, there were certain guys in our team, uh, a lot of them, so only 6 guys on our team got paid. So the rest, when I say we had not that many guys in practice, well, the rest are adults, right? So they have jobs. A lot of them have kids, so they're going to come when they can. We had one receiver, his name was Matthew Abshon. He had 3 kids, and he was there every day. It's not like he was getting, 10 targets a game, but he showed up every day. He was an amazing teammate. Um, and I should have told him this too. I should have text him, Google Translate it, but just him showing up every day. When I know he had kids at home, he just worked a long ass job, and he's coming to practice every week. And like I said, some days it was just like 6 of us that got paid because obviously we have to be there because we're getting paid, and there might be like 8 other guys. And he was consistently always there, always working hard, was never negative, always like a positive dude. And like I said, he was a good player, but he wasn't getting like, Calvin Johnson 12 targets a game. So just little things like that. That's something um that kind of really like brought me back to my love of the game, like when I had in high school, just showing up with the boys and playing. Because junior had that too. But as you know, as you move up, it changes. Certain guys are there to get their scholarship money. Certain guys are there to get girls. A lot of guys are there to just get the track suits. They can wear it around campus so they can go back home and tell people they play on the team. And then certain guys really do love every aspect of the game. But seeing that from a guy who's like, I think he's like 34, with kids at home showing up every day was really inspiring to me. Kind of got back to the roots of like why I played the game in the first place. I just think something like I kind of lost. Not think I was in the game for the wrong reasons, but I've just kind of been around, like I said, a lot of guys. You kind of get in the grind of college football where it's like workouts, meetings, and you just like you lose track of like, do I really even enjoy playing in the first place? So getting back to that was something I saw from one guy at practice was really huge. So
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And I heard a lot of guys in my football career say, "Oh, the second I'm done having fun with it, then I'm not going to play anymore." And it's like, yeah, BS. There's a lot of guys who put up with more than they should have. And there's also a lot of guys I saw who quickly had their souls sucked out of them, or the soul that loved football sucked out of them because of a coach or a player or whatever, or a bad experience. And and I'm not trying to put a negative damper, but it's the untold side of playing university football, right? Or high level football is people think it's this big glamorous thing. And I remember at UFC, people like in residence were like, man, you guys won, congrats, and this and that. And I was like, I didn't play.
yeah, yeah,
I don't care. And guys are like, you're so selfish. And how dare you? It's like, what am I supposed to do?
mm-hmm.
This means that I'm never going to live here again. Is that supposed
Yeah,
to make me happy? What did I
yeah,
come here for? And
mm-hmm.
ironically, the best thing that came from living there was all my friends and all the people I made who had nothing to do with football in the first place.
Yeah,
So again, life finds a way, but
mm-hmm.
it's yeah, like the expectations versus reality, all the memes and people, the way that people don't really understand being self-aware. I think that's just a big thing. Like when I work at my radio station job, there was these guys in the creative department who are so good at writing ads. They're so smart. They're really funny. And I remember they were sharing memes from Meme Base at lunch. Guys who are middle-aged looking at Meme Base. I know. And I remember they showed one of like, oh, my childhood dreams versus reality. And they were like, oh, that's so true. And it was like a unicorn in one picture, and the other was like a smokestack that was beaten up that looked like a unicorn.
Yeah,
And I was like, man, that says so much. Like that is just, I know that they're joking and they're laughing, but like, I don't want to be like that. I really, really don't. And trying to do the work to find out what it is to not end up like that that's the $1 million question for a lot of people. And it takes a lot of time to figure that out.
yeah. It takes a lot of introspection. I kind of went through the same thing. I forget. I think it was a family friend. He kind of came over and we were kind of talking about like the transition of like trying to find a career you like. I remember he was like joking when he made the quote, like he's like, ah, Sawyer, we all hate our jobs in our lives. You just deal with it as you get older, you get used to it. And he was like kidding, but man, I was like, holy, like that was a depressing quote to hear. I was like, man, and that scared the shit out of me. It really, really did. And I remember hearing that, being like, oh damn. I was like, and so when I got this drilling job, I remember I was thinking to myself one day I was at work, I was covered in mud. I was wearing, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining because you know, I was grateful to have a job, right? A lot of people just to have be able to work, make a living for yourself is very important. So I never want to sound like I'm being negative or like being or complaining. But I remember I was covered in mud one day and I looked at myself, I'm like, man, my life. And I was actually working on the outskirts of Moose Jaw on a pipeline. I was like, man, my life is becoming a country music song. I'm like a local high school football star who's working a blue collar job. And I was like, I almost laughed, but I was like, I almost cried at the same time. I was like, man, I was like, that's when I made a decision. I was like, well, I can't do this anymore. So that's why um, I was proud of myself to make that transition. But like you said, it takes a lot of introspection and a lot of like admitting to yourself, maybe you're not where you want to be, um, but also having the wherewithal to do something about it. Because, like you said, I'm sure that, like the guys in the department and the guy that said that quote that I would about hating your life and just dealing with it, they recognize it, they see it, but they're like, well, whatever. I'll just keep doing this. Maybe it'll pay off when I'm retired, or maybe something good will come along. And I just like I don't know. I can't live life like that. So.
What do you feel most passionate about, like just in general? Like, because I know you love football and you can name like quarterback stats and players and colleges, but like, I don't know, like, have you ever sat down and asked yourself, like, what do you really, really enjoy and like just done a brain dump of it?
Honestly, man, I feel like I'm at my best when I'm in a creative mode. Like, and it's something stupid, like whether I tweet something I think is funny or whether it's like I make an Instagram story that just hits me like a movie quote, whatever, and I kind of type out. That's when I feel like I'm at my not my best, but I feel like that's when I'm like not thinking. I'm just kind of like it sounds weird, but just I'm sure you can attest to it. You're just kind of doing and you're just like I feel good. Like that's where I feel like I'm at my best. And so like, I just like creating stuff, funny stuff like that. Or, I love movies and books and just like just ideas and stuff like that. So that's maybe I wish it was something I don't wish, but like it'd be a lot easier for me if it was something easier. Like, oh man, I want to be a teacher like my parents. I can go get, I can go teach right now. But it's just like not that someone's like calling me, but I feel like I really do want to try and I know I can use my mind to be creative and create something for myself. Um, now I'm starting to get long-winded again. That was a really good question you asked me. But it's just about kind of using my gifts, which I think is my sense of humor and my ability to create. And like I said, that's when I feel I'm at my best. I'm sure you have times where you feel like doing this. You're like, you don't even know what time it is. You're not checking the time. You're just
No.
doing this, enjoy it, right? And
Yeah.
so and you just found that passion. So for me, that's something I'm trying to find right now. But that was a good question. Yeah. It's like
I mean, oftentimes we don't ask ourselves enough the simple things like, what do you actually enjoy? What do you really, what like sets your soul on fire, or something that just makes the time irrelevant? And I've asked that question to people before, and sometimes they're like, "Oh, well, I like this, but I would have to create a small business or blah blah blah." And it's like, okay, or if you've never spent time trying to figure out what you like, then maybe you should prioritize that first, because yeah, you need to survive, but if you don't know what you like doing, how are you ever supposed to know if you
mm,
don't ask yourself that question? Or talk about traveling, like if you've never been anywhere else, how are you supposed to know what the rest of the world is like, or if the life that you're living right now is even congruent with how you want to live based on who you are? Like, I'm sure, like you said, when your mom and dad pulled up to France and taking a picture of every single like bakery and every single place, it's
oh
like
yeah,
someone from Moose Jaw is like can might as well be like another planet,
yeah,
like.
for sure.
But for people there, it's like, well, whatever. We hate these tourists while they're hacking darts, and the city of Paris is dirty and littered with garbage all over the streets up to the Eiffel Tower. But it's like, it's so true, man. I met people in Brazil, Portugal. Like, I remember I met up with a guy in Portugal actually who worked at a golf course, and I was asking him about like living there, and he was like, "Why would you ever want to live here?" I was like, "Dude, What do you mean? You live in a lush, green, beautiful paradise on an island in the middle of the ocean, far away from everybody. No one bothers you. The weather is never too bad. It's never too hot. It's fairly inexpensive. You can basically raise a homestead there if you want. You can farm all year. You can just be by yourself and just live in peace and tranquility with nature. But again, they don't see that because that's what they're accustomed to. So it's like trying to get a second set of eyes or changing your perspective is important because yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things before you went to France like whatever, the way ordering pizza and drinking Fresco on a Friday night is a scene, and then you go to Cannes, you're like, oh damn, the most famous movie stars in the world who are
Yeah.
all from all these movies I can quote are literally walking down the red carpet as I'm standing peering over the fence.
Yeah. No, it is crazy. And that's one thing about travel. You learn so much about yourself. I know it's like that cheesy, they're like cliche thing, but you actually do. Like you said, like the Cannes Film Festival's on. I live 5 minutes away from the red carpet. I'm walking down there one night. Everyone's wearing tuxedos and dresses, and I'm down there in jorts and my Crocs, and I hear the Indiana Jones theme music. I'm like, oh, no way. And I turn, and Harrison Ford's coming out of the theater, walking down the red carpet. And it was just like a moment. I'm like, wow, this is like crazy. I know I'm here to play football, but at the same time, like, when am I ever going to get to see this? Like, Sydney Sweeney, Leo DiCaprio are like, I didn't get to see them because it was packed for them. But I mean, I saw Gigi Hadid, I saw The Weeknd, and not that it's a big thing if they're celebrities or people. But it's just the atmosphere. I was watching, they had a theater set up. I was watching Thelma and Louise on the beach, and that was another moment. I think when you asked me, like, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Like, this is like, I'm, it's just another external kind of experience. That's one thing as I get older, I'm like, man, I want to gather as many cool experiences as I can. And so whether they're negative, positive, whatever, in the end, they all kind of turn out to the same thing. They kind of teach you a lot about yourself. And so I gathered so many of those in France. And to your point about like perspective, I learned like I was like, oh man, I was like, I'll play in France and I'll keep playing a different country for like 5 years and they'll be sweet. But I'm like, honestly, man, I'm like 6 months is a long time. I'm like, I'm kind of a homebody. I miss my parents, miss my family, miss my friends, and I like moose. I mean, no one loves moose more than I do. That's a well-known fact. Um, but you know, I've seen the Mediterranean, I've seen the beach, I've seen the Eiffel Tower, I've seen the bay in Monaco, I've seen the French Alps. But to me, the most beautiful view for me is the view out of my backyard here in the valley in Moose Jaw. And I tell people that like you're full of shit. But honestly, I'm being honest. That's my perspective. Not that I want to live in Moose Jaw my whole life, but for me, that's like, moving away made me appreciate the things I had back home uh, even more. While at the same time, I'm like, it would be cool to kind of go see a little more of the world. Maybe not for 6 months at a time, for a little bit less. So again, it just kind of teaches you a lot about yourself, and I'm super glad, I did it because that's in your life too. I mean, it's all about taking chances, right? And like sometimes I might seem crazy. Like I'm sure when you told people you're like, I'm leaving my job at the radio, and they're like, well, what are you gonna do? And you're like, well, I have this idea. But again, they can't see it, right? It's not tangible. So they're like, I'm sure people, even some of your friends, are probably like, oh, cool, man. But then they're like, they're by themselves, like, oh, fucking, what is he doing? And I had that when I was going up to France. People are like, what? How many times I get it? Like, you mean soccer? I'm like, when have I ever played soccer? No, I don't play soccer. I'm like,
You should take that as a compliment. They believe in your athletic ability so much you can play a
I mean, I
completely different
guess
sport in a country that's one of the best in the world at it without
exactly.
ever having played.
So just comments like that would piss me off at the beginning, but then I'd be like, I just can't learn another thing too. Is just let it slide, right? Because a lot of people, it has so little to do with yourself, what people's opinions of what you're doing is. Mostly it's everything to do with them. So I got that a lot. I got well, they play football in France. I'm like, yeah, they do. I just like, I'm going over there. I'm not just going over there like, well, maybe we'll play. Like, no, they have a league. It's not going to be. I never told anybody, oh, this is like probably the second best league just under the NFL. Like, no, I knew it was going to be a level, a little bit less of a level than what I'm used to. But I was very open about like why I was going there. I wanted to play football and live abroad and experience new things. But again, for a lot of people, even a lot of people I thought were open minded, it turns out maybe they weren't as open minded as I thought they were going to be. I'm sure you've seen that too. A lot of people are like, man, I thought you'd be a little bit more, you know, I don't need you to be happy for me, but at the same time, it's like, oh damn, that's kind of a little bit disappointing. So But you just kind of let that stuff go. But it's interesting. I'm sure you saw that too when you kind of made that change. Because again, I think a lot of people see that, they're like, oh man, I wish I could kind of make a change like that. And a lot of people could, but they just don't want to. And again, a lot of people have kids or a house or home mortgage, and it's harder for them for sure than
Yeah.
it is for me or you. But I think it's just about taking the chance uh, and going for it, despite what people think,
You have to ask yourself those
including yourself.
questions. Yeah, like you
Yeah.
have to ask yourself those questions before you have a mortgage and kids, and when
Mhm.
you monitor the interest rate, like your heartbeat, like because that's
Yeah.
the first I said to the guest I had in the first episode of this podcast, I said to him as a being serious and as a joke, we could literally him and I just host a show entirely about all the things we talk about because of how much depth there is to being a minimalist or traveling and just this concept in life that he was talking about, I think is so bang on. When you're at a point where you are generally in control of what you do, the negative aspects of your life are not negatives. They are simply the cost of living that life. So if you, let's say you live in Moose Jaw and you do the classic thing, like you have two kids by the time you're your age and you're married and you already, whatever, had your do it yourself wedding with all the mason jars at the local hall and all these things. And then whatever, like that stereotypical life. There's benefits to it and there's negatives to it. But the negatives are simply the cost of, like, maybe you can't travel around to France or you can't afford to, or you barely make enough money just to survive living in a house in Moose Jaw. But you have the comfort and the stability of owning a home, of having equity, of having a family, of having people that support you, your friends, consistency. But on the flip side, let's say you go as a swashbuckler to France and you're traveling and you see Indiana Jones and you're breaking into parties for celebrities. The downside of that is that you can't look outside your backyard every day and you can't see your mom and dad every day. And you can't go just hang out with your high school friends at the local bar or Boston Pizza or whatever is the most popular establishment there, right? This is a trade-off. So it's not
Classic.
that one is better than the other. It's just what costs are you willing to pay for the
Mhm.
life that you say you want to live?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Wow. Damn, man, I haven't thought about it like that. That is so true. And I think that's kind of gets back to like the competing of like, I want to go do this thing, but then, or I want this, but when you get it, you're not content with it. So that's kind of the battle for me to like be grateful for what I have, but then also kind of moving towards where I want to be. And I think that's just kind of basically that's what we're talking about. That's the battle. And that's the tough thing that every day it's kind of a thing for me. But instead of like fighting it, I'm kind of embracing it and being like, man, I'm grateful that I even have that choice. Because a lot of people around the world, they don't have that choice, right? They wake up and their day's their day. That's what it is. They don't have a choice, right? I think that's the biggest thing. And for me, the older I get, the more I want to be surrounded by people that are a little more open minded, not set like it's this way. It's got to be like
Mhm.
this. Because this is how dad did it. This is how mom does it. This is how I do it. And they've never stopped to ask, well, is this how I want to do it? You know? Uh, and even if it was good, maybe your dad was a doctor, you have to be a doctor, whatever. Maybe shit, I'm not going to be a doctor. But definitely, it took me 6.5 years to get an arts degree in history. So God knows how long it would take to become a doctor. But, that's the thing. I think it's just being grateful for where you are and kind of moving towards where you want to be, and just having an open mind because then you can see there's different paths to take. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So like I said, man, a few weeks ago, I was being an asshole. Because I was like, shit, man, I don't want to work and stuff for the rest of my life, you know? Um, but now it's kind of like, no, there's a lot of open opportunities out there. I just gotta keep my eyes open, and then go for it, which is what I've always done. Something cool will come along because that's kind of been my life. I've been blessed in a lot of areas like that. So God, I even think, I mean, a year ago I was working my drilling job. Now I'm here. This past year's been crazy. I'm sure you can look back and be like, whoa, so much has changed in a year. So I can't wait to see where I'm at next year. Who knows? Maybe I'll be sitting here with you chopping about. Maybe we'll be hitting it big or not. Who knows? Either way will be good though. I know that.
There's a quote. There's a quote, a comment I saw on a YouTube video that I sent to my friend who I recorded with the first podcast episode with. And this is what the comment reads: no matter what path you choose, there are prices to be paid. No one embraces the Zen slash Tao slash hippie slash creative path as completely as surfers who literally ride waves. The first lesson is this: money is not wealth. The second lesson: experiences are more valuable than possessions or things. And the third lesson: by the time you arrive at your goal, it's never what you imagined or expected.
Yeah, that's kind of mind blowing. That that pretty much encapsulates, yeah, my life until this point. That's crazy. And some random person wrote that on YouTube.
That was on an Ali Abdal video on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
And so he's like a
Cool.
productivity YouTuber who
Yeah.
talks like, I watched one of his videos too when I was considering quitting my job. How he talked about going from being a doctor in the UK to being
Mhm.
like a productivity YouTuber. Like this, that's why when I think of you and what you're good at, it's like, what would probably put you in the greatest state of flow is not a job that even exists. It's something that you would probably have to create. And I think that's
Mhm.
the difficult thing for most people is like when you create, you're not taking away from other people. But the very difficult thing with creating is that it takes time, it takes doing it, it takes gathering the data points of what works, what doesn't, what resonates with people, what doesn't, etc., and continuing to iterate that and use the power of compound interest and doing that consistently in order to figure out what that is. And when I read that quote, it made me realize, yeah, like you have to find a balance between appreciating where you've come from and having something you're striving towards. Because if you're too stuck one way, then you're never going to be satisfied. And if you're too much smelling the roses in hindsight, then you're never going to be able to move on. Right? Like
Mhm.
it's either you're Al Bundy, who's talking about the time he scored 4 touchdowns against his old nemesis Bud Spare Tire Dixon, or you're just constantly you're just you're crawling in the desert. You're going for the
Yeah.
the oasis that's there, but it's just a mirage. So
Yeah.
it's like I think when you taking action and doing something that makes you forget about the time and that aligns with what you're good at, I think it's not to ramble, but it's like I hear people all the time say, follow your passions. And I used to think that was really good advice, but I have to slightly disagree in saying that you sometimes you have to do what you're good at and then you can become passionate about it. But there
Mhm.
has to be a level. I think what you should do is follow the things that give you energy, not passion. Because passion can be acquired if you're good at something. But energy is different. If you go to a job and you're good at it, but you have no energy and you hate it, then it's no good. But
Yeah.
if you became a host of a barstool show or something, for example, that already existed, and you're like, man, I'm so fired up. Like when I was working with Jamie and he's super fired up, he loves being there and he's excited. It's like that gives you energy, follow that. But if it doesn't give you energy, then you need to reassess, no matter
Yeah.
whether you're good at it or passionate.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Because, like you said, I mean, for me, I want to do something kind of in the media world or start my own thing, whatever. I mean, I'd love to have my own show, and I don't even know what it would be because it wouldn't be like some like I don't think I could do a sit down. It would be like maybe like pretty wild. I'd have to think about that. But like you said, when you first started something new, it might not be very good. I'm sure when you started doing this, you look back in your first episodes, like in your first show, you're probably like, oh my God, that's even hard to watch, right? But in the moment, you didn't care, right? You weren't doing it for that. You're doing it because it gives you energy, right? And like when I first started football, honestly, I wasn't even very good until I was like 16, but I didn't know that because I didn't care. I didn't even think about that. I was just out there playing because I enjoyed it. Like you said, it gave me energy. And so I'm kind of in the same spot now where, I could get a job and make a lot of money, but like you said, maybe it doesn't give me anything, doesn't do anything for me. So I was trying to find that something that does give me energy, and maybe I'm not very good at it all to begin with, but I probably won't give a shit because I'll keep doing it until I get good at it, like you've done too, right? And that's to me, that's more fulfilling than anything, right? Like in life, you can look back, like holy shit, I was not very good, when I started, but I got pretty good, and I'm gonna keep going. So I think it's
Anything that's worth being good at is worth being bad at first. So
mhm.
all those cliche quotes you see in classrooms at schools, like
Yeah,
every expert was once a beginner, but it's like until you're actually there doing it, then that's when you realize it. And I think having that lived experience teaches you more than someone else telling you, like, go do this or go do that. It's like when you do your own thing, there's nobody to tell you what to do.
Right.
Nobody. And it wasn't like I felt really fulfilled doing the podcast before, but then it started to get to a point where I felt like I was running in circles. And I started to see the world of sports media, like it really became tainted for me because I was seeing interviews and I'm like, that's a stupid question. That's really dumb. This is pointless. Why are you saying this? Blah, blah, blah. It's a setup. This isn't meaningful. And not to say that I don't like work that's done in sports. Of course I do. People who have features and things that are in depth and they're real. I love that. But I found that what I was idolizing was touching a string within me that was from my childhood, like being a kid and seeing people like sports anchors on TV or people who called games like soccer games, like those things that just elicit that passion and make you feel like so elevated. But then as I got older, I realized I'm like, oh, maybe that's not really what I want to do. Even if, yeah, I could be good at it. I could have just shut up, kept going and grinded and whatever. But then you get to a point where you realize you can't go back, and to change would cause major friction. It would identity crisis, all these things. Or you just realize it's easier to just settle for comfort, take it on the chin and not do anything about it. And so when I've seen people who have been burned or who have realized after the fact they didn't like it, that's why I try to talk to them, as many of them as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And although at times it can seem like I'm ranting or I'm asking a billion questions, you can learn from other people's mistakes and successes, right? It's a shortcut to sometimes it's a shortcut to having to experience that yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking, doesn't it? I was gonna ask you, it doesn't piss me off, but like I think about those cliches I looked at like in my grade six classroom, and now that I'm like 26, I'm like, holy shit, like those are all extremely true. Like they're up there for a reason. I'm like, I look back, I'm like, oh, those are so dumb when I was like 13, but now I'm like, oh man, that guy knew what he was talking about. Whoever put those up there, like the Selvo picture, like live in the present or whatever. That kind of pisses me off sometimes. But no, I know I feel the same way. Did you kind of get tired of like, you know, you're talking to Matt Dunnigan, but you're asking him about like some touchdown pass you threw, and in your back of your head, you're like, I don't really, care about this or whatever. I want to go deeper. And that's what I find too. Like when I watch sports, that's why I love the E60s or the documentaries or when people ask you, like I can't even watch like Undisputed or like First
No,
Take.
no,
I
no,
can't I can't watch anymore. And I used to
no.
watch it, and I used to be in a bad mood, be like, oh fucking Skip, like how can you say that? And it's like, man, who cares? Like this is all a show, right? So you got to cut through the bullshit and kind of get to what's real. So I feel like you kind of got there, right? Uh, and I'm there too if I want to do something because my dad's like, he's like, oh, you'd be so good on like TSM. I'm like, I don't want to work. No disrespect, I don't want to work the sports desk. Not that I can maybe even get there one day or whatever, but um, like I said, I want to go deeper too, because like the stuff that I'm interested in as I get older, it's not so much how many touchdown passes the guy threw for, or whatever. I want to know, like, man, like that's what my Clyde Bethel Thompson. That was my like he's played for like 9 teams, but not many people know that, right? Because they don't go deeper. They just want to know like how many touchdowns he threw for last year. Did he have a good game? But like it's so much more the journey the person got to get where they're at, which is really cool about what you're doing now, and even what you're doing before too. So you that I ask really good questions, but I see the same things when I see it. I'm like, man, I really don't care like what this guy was thinking on this play or whatever. Some people might, but for me, it's just like I can't take much uh from that. So that's why I think it's cool what you're doing, and like people might look at me like I'm not. I mean, I guess technically I played professional football, semi-professional football in for France or whatever, and I don't have it figured out at all. I think people by now can see that, but I'm very open and honest, and hope people can, whoever watches this can take what they want from it. My biggest thing is just to know that what I've noticed is just the biggest thing is getting out of your own way. Because at times I've been my own worst enemy. Um, as far as like self-doubt, self-criticism, caring what others think. Um, and I think that's been the biggest thing for me. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And for me, even to admit this, like 2 years ago, we were on that show, if you had asked me, I would have like not even brought it up. And even back then, I kind of felt like that too. Um, but I just look at us now, we're kind of grizzled vets. We've been through it. We've been in the game now. I mean, we're only like 27, 26. Like 36. I don't even want to know how much I've been through at that point, but I'm grateful for it all. And that's been my biggest thing if people want to take away is just to know that, none of us really have it all figured out. And we're just kind of going along with it, trying to live the best we can. And for me, my constant thing is just trying to get out of my own way, um, and take one day at a time and live by those cliches that we saw on our whiteboards at school back in grade six. It pisses me off sometimes. Those are so true.
Yeah,
So,
man.
so
One of the first quotes that comes to mind when you talk about self-doubt is like Tim Grover is someone who love following him, like super inspiring. And one of the things he talks about is like, he's like, you're supposed to have fear. You're supposed to be scared. It's an instinct, but you're not supposed to have doubt. Only you can put doubt in your head. And
mm,
only no one else can get inside you unless you let them. And when I hear those things, it's daily reminders, and it is important to, I think, to want to achieve more and to be ambitious and help people and impact people. And I think that was when I started to realize at the radio station, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to be honest with myself, I could keep doing this for 20 years if I wanted, and I could probably climb the ranks. I could move to Toronto, I could work on TSN or Sportsnet for who knows how long of a time. It's never certain. But then I asked myself, what impact am I really making? And that was the big question for me that I couldn't answer. And
mm,
it's the same question I asked myself when I was playing football and trying to, like, you're trying to make the CFL and all these things. And like, why am I playing? And I would always tell myself, well, just to prove you can do it. It's like, but that's not good enough. Because then the time's going to get tough and it's not, you're going to fold like a house of cards. And
mm,
then funny enough, when I started working out in January, I was like, okay, I don't want to be a fat, lethargic slob like most people who end up working office jobs who don't take care of themselves. And what happened was I realized, wow, people, like, they looked at me different and they were like, oh, like, people throw the disrespectful comments and backhand stuff like, oh, you're just trying to get swole and you're just so full of yourself and you want to look like Rich Piana, like, and well, maybe part of that is true in the beginning. What ends up
yeah,
happening is you realize, wow, the benefits of working out or exercising and doing something as simple as that changes your perspective on life. And when people started asking me like, oh man, like guys at the gym were like, how much do you bench? I was like, dude, like, you're asking me how much I bench? Are you shitting me?
yeah,
But it was in those moments like that, that loose guy camaraderie where it's like you just by proximity, you see someone in the same place, you never talk to them. All of a sudden, when you do talk to them, it's like your best friends.
mm,
Like that experience from working out changed my life like forever. Cause I was like, wow, now I realize how important this is to me. And knowing I can help people and knowing that my love of learning other cultures or languages, knowing that that kind of all ties in together to like helping someone in a major pillar of their life, that is really awesome. And I want to continue to explore that because it gives me energy when I can help people with fitness or if I can help people to live a healthier life. Because the three most important things that people want to improve in their life: money, health, relationships. That's it. If you can find a way to have energy that's very high in one of those three buckets, then you can create whatever the hell you want because people want more of any of those three things.
mm. Yeah, for sure. And then that's like it's kudos to you. Amazing that you kind of got to that realization. Or maybe I think a lot of people get to that realization that we talked about, but like don't want to do anything about it. For you to do something about that, that's big time. And um, for me, it's kind of not so much for me in the gym. That could be anyone's aspect of life, right? It could be like, I don't know, following what gives you energy. Or for me, like when I coach now, when I help quarterbacks, obviously I want to help them with their fundamentals and their skills. But I think what gets lost is like the mental part. And again, like why, especially when they get to high school, like why are you playing the game, right? Or are you just playing the game every Saturday to like maybe just try and get a scholarship to go play? Because I'm telling you, I've been there when you get those offers ever, it does feel cool, but are you doing disservice to your teammates, and a lot of your best friends you go to high school with? Just be in the moment, just enjoy playing. Like I think it's the biggest thing I see a lot of young, not quarterbacks in sports is like everyone's just playing for these like future, goals. And when I was young, I got to that point too, where it's like, am I even enjoying? I just want to be out there because I enjoy playing with my friends, and that's the biggest thing I've been trying to get across to some of these young quarterbacks that I coach. Because I go back to I help coach in high school here, and again, I don't want to sound like Uncle Rico, or whatever, but I had a really successful high school career here, and so when I bring it out, a lot of coaches are always talking about, yeah, so Sawyer used to do this, how he used to do it, and I'm kind of like getting out of that because that doesn't help this young kid, right? Because he didn't see me play. I mean, I can try and help explain it to him, but for them, it's trying to find out like what's inside them and what what's their style, what makes them unique, what's their mentality that they can bring to the game. And bringing that out of someone is like that's the biggest thing. I think for you, you found that in yourself, and you're trying to help other people do that. And for me, that's the biggest thing. Both my parents were teachers and coaches. I know they help a lot of kids do that, and so that's something I want to do uh, as well. And it's not really telling somebody what to do. It's kind of like showing them how to get it out of themselves. So that makes sense. And it all starts like introspection. So
Yeah,
look at
man.
us. Been some deep points here, man. Yeah, this is good stuff.
Yeah,
This is
man.
like a therapeutic session for myself. I needed this, man. Like I said, like a couple weeks ago, I was like, I brought a few times, but I felt so bad because I was like such an asshole for like a week straight. I was like, because I was stuck in my own head, right? I'm sure you were in there too. You're like, I have all this, I should have all this opportunity. For me, I was kind of bitter because I felt like I'm officially done playing football. Like I'm incredibly retired. I have no desire to go in the backyard or out to practice at all. So that's how I know I'm done. But for me, it's like I always hear that, oh, you'll build these relationships, you'll have all these opportunities. And now that I'm done football, I'm like, okay, well, where are they? And again, I gotta go look for them. I'm not, and again, I don't want to sound like some ass, so I don't want things handed to me. But you know how it is when you grow up, it's like you're gonna have this, you're gonna have that. Maybe in the United States that's true, but here I was a little bit, I've kind of moved past it, but I was at the point where I was like, man, am I really just done football? And all I have to show for it is like maybe some trophies on the wall and like some bumps and bruises and concussions. And for me, that was tough. But I had to get out of that mindset of like I wasn't playing football to maybe meet somebody and get a cool job. That would have been nice. Maybe that'll happen. But I kind of had to get out of that negative mindset. I think that comes back to like it being different. I'm gonna start rambling again too, but when people talk about when they want to play college football, it is an amazing experience. Everyone's experience is different. Mine was like a roller coaster, but it's not at all what you think it's going to be. At least for me, it wasn't. Like I came out in 2015, and at that time, Twitter, Instagram, you had all that, but you didn't really know the inner workings of the teams and like meetings and like running early morning workouts. You kind of knew about them until you go through them. Like you really have no idea what the experience is. It's like it's a grind, right? You only play 8 games in a year, right? And so it's not this like for some people it is, but for a lot of people and a lot of guys I don't play with, it's not some glamorous thing, and that's why a lot of guys only last like 1 or 2 years. A lot of really good players, like a lot of guys, you come in, you're like, oh man, this guy's gonna be an all Canadian in 2 years, and then the next training camp comes around, he's not on the team, right? So that's the thing, and so I think getting back to it is just like being present and are you actually enjoying what you're doing? Or are you just doing it to try and get some like external, well, man, I did all this and like this is what it is. But I had to get out of that mindset of like I wasn't playing football to like get anything. I was playing football because like you said, I was gathering experiences which will help me in the next step of my life. So
Yeah, man. That's very well said. And I met a lot of guys who the time playing football, yeah, like you really don't know where it's gonna lead you. And people always say, like, oh man, like you're gonna have some of the greatest friends of your life from the locker rooms. You're gonna miss practice and all these things. And when I finished playing, I was like, I don't miss anything. I really
yeah,
don't. And
yeah.
like it's ironic because a lot of people can say the same thing about high school. Oh, your best friends are gonna come from high school, best friends from university. And it's like that's not always the case for everybody. And I think
Mhm.
this is a general theme of like expectations versus reality, like building up this expectation, like your best friend, you're gonna play alongside him and you would die for him and blah blah blah, and you guys are gonna go through thick and thin and you're gonna meet your future boss from football. It's like there's no guarantee that's gonna happen, and
Mhm.
oftentimes it doesn't happen. The only guys who most of the time get those experiences are the ones that actually play, the
Yeah.
ones that people will remember.
Mhm.
That's the tough reality of being in that situation. And so I think if you can even make friends from football, amazing. That's an extreme bonus. And actually, the funny thing is, it was Brian Towers, who used to be the head coach of Saskatchewan. I tried out for U of S in
Moose Jaw
2016.
guy. UT
And
Moose Jaw guy.
oh, really?
Hmm? Oh, 1 second, sorry. Hey, how you doing, Keith? Okay, we'll do. Thank you. Well, Big Keith, he's watering the lawn for my sister's wedding's coming up here. Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, no,
I'm
no. BT's a Moose Jaw guy.
Busha guy. Yeah, he went to Peacock. Went to my high school. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he
That's
told
a,
me something I think is actually a great way to wrap today's episode. He was saying he's like I'm gonna be honest with you, like you know playing or being a university student athlete is a great experience, but the most important thing you should always focus on is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. He's like, if you can play football on top of going to school, that's a bonus. When he said that to me, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, isn't the purpose like I'm literally moving around, like being a gypsy, going everywhere just so I can play football? Like, school comes afterwards, right? I'll get whatever degree is, best degree available is what I'll get. But then it wasn't until I realized a few years after, it's like, wow, it's been 5 years since I've played football. It's now been the same amount of time since I played football that I even spent doing it.
Mhm.
And I don't miss it. And that's okay. And that was just a chapter of my life that is over. And your life isn't over because football ends. And I think that's where a lot of people can get caught up in being married to an identity and they're not willing to let it die. And if you're
Mhm.
willing to let these preconceived identities that other people and labels people give you, if you let that die, then that's when you become truly free to live. Because then you can do whatever you want.
100%, man. I was gonna say the exact same thing. The only constant is change. Um, so I like back, 5 years ago, I was about to go out to U Ottawa, and I was feeling real good. I was playing some of the best football of my life, and I went to Ottawa in first year, and I did play really well. Um, and now look, fast forward 5 years, yeah, now I'm done, and it's like if you'd have told me, I never really thought about being done playing. Uh, I think a lot of people with anything, with high athletics, because it's just something I've always done. And again, not to sound like this, but around Musha, I'm kind of known as like the quarterback, the football guy. And now I'm not doing that anymore. And so again, it's like moving away from that identity, which is tough, like you said. Um, I'm the same way. I don't miss going to meetings. Training camp. One of my best friends, McGuire Abel, is going his last year at the Rams. And we were kind of talking about training camp. I'm like, man, I don't miss training camp. I don't want no. I miss hanging out with the boys and chopping up the fellas, but I can go do that. I have a great group of friends. I can go fill other ways to do that. But it's a great quality. Your life is not over just because football ends. Your life's not done at 26, right? I'm trying to make it to 100. We'll see. I'm gonna have to get on your nutrition or fitness plan. Um, I get those rich piano arms, get them going. But I got a lot more life to live. I'm excited about it. And that's why I've kind of made that transition of like when I was an asshole a couple weeks ago, I was so stuck in like, man, whatever. I'll go get a shovel and I'll just dig ditches for the next 74 years. But now I'm kind of like, no, man, like I got a lot of opportunity. Like life's exciting. Like life's good. I'm blessed. I got great family, great friends. Some things don't go my way in my life. It's like whatever. I let it roll, keep it moving, and I'm excited for the future. So this kind of honestly, this kind of reinvigorated me of like I kind of needed this honestly. I appreciate it. It's like it's tough. I mean, we're boys, but it's tough. We don't hang out all the time. We've actually never met in person. We send each other stuff
Yet.
on Instagram. Yeah, exactly. We will though. I'll get you on to MJ. A couple of brewskis with the fellas, a couple brews or 12 in the backyard. But it's just good to like have these conversations because I think a lot of people see it like, oh, whatever. It's just a bunch of cheesy talk, whatever. It's like, man, a lot of people are going through it. I know I'm going through it. I know you're going through it. I think a lot of us are. And it's just about being open about it and talking about it. And it just helps you realize, like, man, you're not behind. You're right where you need to be. And life is good. And it's only, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but life's good right now. So it's going to be all right. Just keep going.
Yeah, man. Amen. That's a great way to wrap, man. I couldn't have said it any better myself. We're pretty blessed to be in the positions we're in. We're living, breathing. We have clothing on our backs, food in our stomachs, and a roof over our heads. So we've already won the lottery of being born. Another cheesy quote, but you gotta again
100%.
because if everyone's replaceable. Proof in 100 years, everyone's dead or most
Yeah,
people. So there you go. Do what you want because life is gonna pass you by if you don't.
for sure. Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on the show. And I guess closing, yeah, I think it's like you just keep going, you know, something cool will come along. And just keep your eyes open and not be scared to take a chance. I think that'd be my biggest thing. Not that I don't want to sound preachy or like I think people can tell by now. I'm just living day by day. Kind of a bit of a hippie. I take it day by day. I don't want to tell anyone how to live. I stay as open minded as I can, but at the same time, I know through my experiences that I've learned that you never know what's ahead. Like tomorrow could be crazy. Who knows? I mean, I'll be doing nothing in Moose Jaw tomorrow, so but I don't mind doing that either. So, but thanks, man. I appreciate it.